if you went to live in the Maldives and you just rented an apartment and sat there and just crunched out 40 hours a week of work, probably pretty quickly it would just become another place that you're living in and just working. So I think it's important to say, okay, if you're going to go down this road, you need to keep it exciting, different, fresh. You need to be moving, not letting things get too stale. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. And on this week's Property Education Masterclass, we welcome the Queen Nomad herself, Christina Davis. Now, if you've been following the show for a while, you know we like to talk about property and about business, but I also like to talk about a passion of mine, which is living this nomadic lifestyle and being able to build online businesses that support that way of life. And that's why I thought Christina would be really cool to bring on the show. Originally from the US, but now living in Barcelona, where she's been for the last year or so. But before that, having lived all over the world and being able to do it through building multiple online businesses. So for anybody listening at home who maybe isn't quite fulfilled, who's feeling trapped, who wants a way out, who wants more freedom, who wants more fun, the entire blueprint is in this episode. So enjoy. Guys, if you get value from this episode, please do follow the show, leave us a review. It helps us so much. Until then, get comfortable. This is a great conversation with Christina. Can't wait for you to hear it. Here we go. Christina Davis, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on as well. As the name suggests, the Airbnb Nomads, yes, we are a property podcast, but I'm also, for anybody who's been listening to the podcast and knows about me and my story, very, very passionate about living your best life. You know, what's the point in making money if you're not going to go out there and do cool stuff? Came across you on the socials and you are definitely living your best life. So wanted to have you on to hear about how you've done it, what you're doing, where you're going, how you've kind of made it all happen in an effort to inspire other people that might be listening to this who are feeling like most people, to be quite honest, a little bit trapped, maybe not completely fulfilled with their life, what they're doing, where they're going, and may look to you for some inspiration. So I really appreciate you coming on. So first of all, Christina, people are going to realize as soon as you start speaking that you are not from the UK. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from the US. I'm from New Jersey, and I actually have a background in biology. Is what my degree was in. Back in school, I worked in medical device sales for years in the operating room. And then I made a big switch a few years ago and started working online in marketing and eventually started a podcast management business. And I'm sure we can go into more detail with that story, but it's definitely been a 180. So I totally understand people who might not be fulfilled in what they're doing now and wanting to make a big change. And I love sharing my story and just helping people to realize that you could completely change your life if you really want to.
Yeah, fantastic. Can't wait to get into that. Now, we've immediately got some common ground when it comes to the US. I used to live in, a bunch of different places, Florida, Seattle, Colorado, absolutely love the US. And it's interesting how, wherever we're from, we always kind of, most of us anyway, want to be somewhere else, because I feel like I would be more than happy, if I had an American passport and I could live in the US and just explore that whole country for the rest of my life. But obviously you weren't fully fulfilled or satisfied there. So what was it that made you want to leave?
I do think it's a lot true. What you said is when you're from somewhere, you're like, I want to be somewhere else. Yeah. And I definitely understand that. I think for me, the big sticking point with the US is that it's a culture where you just work your butt off, which is fine, but you sacrifice so much of your joy and life and little things because your career is your identity. It's a lot of who you are, and how you even introduce yourself to people has to be your title and what you do. And I always found that even if having a great career, I wanted more than life and just my career sucking up all of my time. And I had 10 days vacation a year and a mile-long list of places that I wanted to see in the world. And there was no way that was possible between the two. And I realized I had traveled before in college and stuff like that. I lived abroad. And then when I was in my career, I fell back into the rhythm of you work really hard, you make lots of money, you buy the nice car, you have a house, you buy the nice things, and you're just constantly trying to keep up with that like rat race lifestyle. And it's a lot of, it depends on where you are from the US. I'm from New Jersey, right by New York City. So a lot of it's like keeping up with the Joneses, staying on top of things. And a lot of that just really doesn't matter at the end of the day. And it didn't to me. To me, it's like the memories, where I've gone, the things I've seen. And so the culture of kind of working your life away. And I'd have friends who would come home and be like, oh, I worked a 60-hour week so long. And they're like, I worked a 70-hour week. And I'm like, this isn't a game I'm trying to win. Like, it's not a competition. And it's not that anyone's trying to compete to work more, but everyone's just in that same bubble. And I really wanted to break out of it. And once I left the US, now when I go back and I like talk to my friends or my family, I realize it's just still exactly the same. And I definitely prefer enjoying life a bit more and making sure I'm fully living it, because we really don't know how long we've got here.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. What is it that you think made you different and made you think that way? You know, I completely agree. I'm the same. Can't really understand the other way of doing it, where you just kind of grind it out for 50 or 60 years, you know, just looking forward to that retirement if you get there. But the majority of people do, right? That's normality. You know, go to school, get the job, hustle, get the house, have the family. And that seems to satisfy most people, at least on the outside. So was there anything kind of obvious in your upbringing or your life, maybe your parents, that made you feel and kind of go this different direction?
It's funny because I feel like I've always been the black sheep of my family, and in all different facets. And I think this is definitely the biggest one. But when I was younger and I went to university and I graduated, I studied abroad, which was awesome. I studied abroad in Barcelona, which is where I live now. And I did love it. But I don't think it was until after I graduated college and I moved and lived in Tokyo and Singapore for about 2.5, 3 months. And in that time period of like really locating to a completely different country, completely different culture, and kind of experiencing, I hadn't been to Asia at that point in my life. I'd only been to Europe a couple times with my family, and I'm fortunate enough to travel when I was younger. But this really put me out of my comfort zone, and I got to experience what it was like living in a different place. And I think that just always sat in my mind. And after I returned back to the US and I started my job and I was working for years, that nagging sense to like move abroad and live that life where I was just always kind of, I like being put out of my comfort zone. I like trying new cuisines, new foods, new cultures, going to new places. And I get really bored of the same things constantly. And I'm always seeking something new. So I think that side of me kind of always pushed me towards the travel stuff. I definitely think I was not like most people when it came to travel. I'm not a let's go to the Caribbean and sit on a beach for a week. I'm like, let's go into the local village and, try and experience the culture that way. So I think that part of my travel joy is different than some people. But I think that living abroad in Asia and really being like at full culture shock mode kind of made me really interested in different ways of living. And I think I met, when I was traveling, and I say this always from all my travel memories, the happiest people I've ever met are the people who are prioritizing their happiness in their life and just kind of enjoying things around them. No matter what culture, no matter how much people make, the happiest people always have been the ones that just enjoy life. And I think that that always really resonated with me as well, which kind of maybe ties into the part that I left the US.
It's funny that you say that about Asia because, I've been to a lot of places, traveled to a lot of places. Not so much now, I'm 43 now, more like, okay, I want to be settled, want my apartment, want my space, want my privacy, all those things that come with getting older. But back in the day, definitely done the hardcore backpacking thing. And when I landed in Bangkok, that was really the first place and probably still one of the only places that when I walked out into Bangkok, it was like, bam, it was like, this is a different planet. The smells, the sounds, the hustle, like the amount of people, the noise. So yeah, completely get that. And it is a massive culture shock. It's like, shit, I'm a long way from home.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm interested to know, like, what was your support network like when you decided to pack it all in and leave the US and start this new life? Because I think that can be a big thing as well, especially in the US. I had Ben Lutz on. I don't know if you know Ben. He's got a huge social media following. Him and his family have been kind of living the nomadic lifestyle for like, I think 7 or 8 years now. And they're from the US. And when they told their friends and family that they were going to leave their really well-paid corporate jobs and they were going to, go on this, long adventure with the kids and see all these different countries, a lot of their friends and family were like, "You're absolutely crazy. Like, what are you doing? You've got the money, you've got the car, you've got the house." So what was your experience like? Was it supportive or was there some pushback?
I would say it was majority pushback. The word crazy was thrown around a lot with me, from friends, family. I think a lot of people weren't super surprised because of the fact that I had always pushed my vacation days to the most amount. Like I would tag on bank holidays and trying to figure out ways that I could go and travel to different places. So everyone knew that I love to travel a lot. But I think at that point in my career, I was 26 when I left. So obviously I'm still young, but I was very much in the building phases. And I had a really great trajectory. Like I had kind of things lined up to where I could have done extremely well for myself. And I was making really good money in my mid 20s. And so when I was leaving that, a lot of people were super surprised and kind of wondering if I was making a good decision because they were like, if you keep going, you'll make even more money and then you'll be set up and then you can go travel to wherever you want. And I'm like, that's not enough for me. Like 1 week vacation is not enough for me to go see a country and feel fulfilled. And so when I quit, I would say my family was supportive in the sense that they were like, okay, you're going to go do this. We'll give you a little bit of time to get this out of your system, but you need to get a job and you need to make money. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to get this out of my system, but like whatever you need to think. And the reality was in my mind, I knew that I needed to do this. No matter how many people told me I was crazy, people told me that this was a mistake, a gap on my resume was going to destroy my career, I could never get a job, might not get a job again in the same field, all those things. In my head, I was like, I actually just don't care. Like, I need to be happy. Like, I need to do this for myself. I can't be down the line 20, 30 years where I am settled and maybe I have a family and a house and I can't just sell everything easily and pick up and go. It's like I have a chance to kind of do it now in my mid 20s and figure my life out. And I don't think if I ever went against the grain, I would have ever gotten where I am now. And it obviously is extremely scary to quit your job. I remember the panic that I had when I called my boss and told him. And he actually wasn't surprised. He was obviously not happy for me to leave, but he was like, Christina, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be you. And I remember hanging up the phone and I was driving home and I literally just like screamed at the top of my lungs in my car. And it was like a combination of excitement and fear because I was like, oh my God, you just did it. But like, oh my God, you just quit. Like it's a total mix of feelings. But you're not always going to get support from people who don't understand your dream. And that's the reality. If they can't fathom it and they've never been there, they're not wanting to go there, they're not going to get it. And that's okay. So I've learned to take people's opinions and advice with a grain of salt if they're not going where I want to go or they haven't been where I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely understand that. I've experienced it, a fair bit. I'm 43. I don't have the family, don't have the kids, kind of lived a very unconventional life. And sometimes I actually had it recently, literally a few nights ago. I went out with a guy for a beer that I didn't really know that well. I met him like through my cycling group here in Mallorca. And, it was that typical kind of, tell me your story, what have you done? And he was, he's been married twice, got the kids, done all this stuff. And he was like, so what about you? Married? And I was like, nope. It's like, okay, kids? I'm like, nope. And he was like, oh, okay. And I could see like in his eyes, he was like, this dude's kind of weird, but it's just the way it went. And, I've had an incredible life because I didn't do that phase. And, some people might think that's good. Some people might think it's bad. And maybe I'm missing out on things on that side, but I don't know. It's just the way it kind of went. So, and maybe we can touch on that with you a little bit later on about how you feel about that stuff. But do you mind me asking, just to help people out at home, when it comes to the finances, because I think everybody, whether they say it or not, probably there's a part of them that would like to just, pack it all in, quit the job, get rid of all their shit and just take off. But the majority of people, at least in the UK, and I know in the US, probably the same as well, a lot of people are just making it through the week, right? Paycheck to paycheck, make the money, pay the bills, start over Monday morning. There's never that kind of cushion enough to kind of cut loose and go follow their dreams, really. So how did you do it? Did you have like a number in mind? Like, what did you leave with financially, if you don't mind talking about that?
Yeah, of course. So I think it's really important if it's a dream of yours to set yourself up with a cushion. Like to me, I was like, I need at least 20,000 in the bank for me to be able to go leave because I still had student loans. Like I still had payments at home that I needed to make while I was traveling. So I had to pay for my travels and pay for my student loans back in the US. So it's like, I need at least 20,000. I ended up leaving with 25, but about probably a little less than a year before I decided I wanted to go, I gave myself a date in mind. It was like at the end of summer of 2019, I'm going. And so 2018 leading up to that, I decided to move back with my parents. I was like, I'm going to not spend money on rent. I cut down on buying myself like nice things. I really cut down on going out for dinners. Like I sacrificed what I needed to do to be able to make that jump and have that cushion of money to savings to kind of go through while I traveled and figured out how to make money. And I think it's really important. So if you do want to do it, you do have to make sacrifices because if you are kind of living either paycheck to paycheck, or if maybe you can't put a lot away in savings, like when I tell you, I printed out my credit card statements and my debit card statements and I highlighted what I could get rid of and I highlighted what I needed to keep. And I broke down exactly how much I made, exactly how much my costs were every month, and what I could actually put away on top of. And sometimes before I left, I sold a bunch of my clothes, I sold my car, I sold things. So I was able to kind of add more to that pot. But there are sacrifices I think you need to make if you want to take the leap without having any income coming in behind you once you're gone in the initial phases. But yeah, I definitely cut back on loads to try and give myself enough of a savings to be able to leave.
Yeah, smart. And what was the lead up time to it? Like how long? Obviously, it sounds like it was very well planned out, very methodical approach to this whole, trip. Did you kind of sit down and literally create like a blueprint? Okay, this is how long I've got. This is how much I need. This is the steps I need to take to get there. Or
So I wanted to do it for about 2.5 years, and it took me like that amount of time to actually make the jump. But at the same time, I was trying to figure out how I could make it happen. And every time I was like, all right, at the start of 2019, I'm quitting my job and then I'm going to go. But then it was, if you don't have enough time on your resume working in a certain job, if you need to come back, that's not going to work. So I was like, all right, I'll give myself a little bit more time at my job and really get like beef up my resume in case I need to fall back on something. And I would always find excuses to not do it. So it wasn't until the summer of 2018, so I had about a year before I left, I went on a trip and I took 2 weeks, like back to back vacation, which was really frowned upon. And I was actually told by my company that it's not a good look to take all my vacation days at once because that's in America, taking 2 weeks off at one stint is like unheard of, which is crazy to me. But I took the 2 weeks. I was like, I won't take another day off for the whole year. I don't care. Took the 2 weeks and I went on a sailing holiday in Europe with some of my friends. And on the flight home, we were approaching over New York and I looked out the window and I literally burst into tears. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I cannot, I don't want to come back to this. I don't want to go back to work. I don't want to live this life. Like, I truly am so not happy and fulfilled. And I was so happy on that trip and it was loving life. And obviously, not every day is a vacation, but being in that setting and kind of doing things that really make me happy and then coming back and being like, all right, I have another year to earn vacation days again. I couldn't fathom it. And so when I got home, I was like, okay, I really think like I want to leave my job. And then about a week after that moment, I had a meeting with one of my territory managers. And he was like, Christina, you're doing really good. Like, look at your boss right now. If you keep it up for another year, you could be him. Like, think of his life. Like, you could have his life. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want that. I was like, holy shit, I don't want that life at all. And it was like these two moments happened very close together. And that was kind of my breaking moment of like, what am I working towards if I don't want my boss's job? And also, I'm not even happy going to work every day. Do we really want to wake up like or go to sleep crying on a Sunday or like be ready to burst into tears on a Monday thinking I have a whole nother week ahead of me of this? And so I gave myself that year. Like I said, I moved back home. I gave myself that year to just save up. And I was super serious about it. I was like, I keep saying I'm going to do this and I'm not doing it. And I'm just getting more and more unhappy. So this is my timeline. It was September of 2019. I'm out. That's it. And kind of just set it all up. And like I said, sat down, went through all my finances and kind of planned as much as I could in that sense. And then I literally booked a one-way ticket, had no plan minus the first month of traveling. I was like, I'm just going to go and going to see what happens. Worst case scenario, I come back home. Like that was the worst case. And I think some people forget that. It's like worst case scenario, you come back home, you get another job. Best case scenario, you get super happy and you find something that you love and you get to create this dream life. That's way better than the worst case of just like going home.
If you love to travel like me and you understand the power in escaping the money for time exchange trap, but you just don't know how to do it, then building an Airbnb consultancy business could be exactly what you have been looking for. Right now in the UK, there is a completely untapped opportunity through helping struggling Airbnb hosts by turning around their underperforming properties and generating you huge commission payments in the process. We are going to teach you all of the tools and all of the techniques that we've learned over the last 5 years through building our very own multiple six-figure Airbnb business, arming you with everything that you need to swoop in and save the day. Minimal startup costs, zero risk, and almost unlimited potential. Sound good? Welcome to the Airbnb Consultant. Contact us through any of the channels included in the studio notes to get the conversation started. Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right when you say that, because for most of us, and I know that not everybody is lucky as we are, but you're so right. Like the worst, like if everything goes to absolute shit, we can just go home and we can, most of us just go and live with our parents, sleep on the couch, go to a friend's house. And for most of us, we can just go and get a job. Might not be our dream job, but we can get a job to start generating an income again of some sorts, right? So how bad can it really be? But what you said about flying in on the plane and looking out the window and just burst into tears, like when I go all the way back to when I first, I left school, did a 4.5 year or 5 year apprenticeship in the UK. Didn't know what to do. Careers advisor said, hey, do you like cars? I'm a 16-year-old kid, right? 16-year-old boy. I'm like, yeah, I like cars. She's like, why don't you be a mechanic? I'm like, okay, cool. So, did that. And halfway through, I'm like, this sucks. I do not want to do this. Don't really know why. I think there was part of it for me was similar to you. Like I was looking around, no offense if they're listening to this, but I was looking at the people I was working with and seeing where they were, and what they were doing and how they looked. And, like they'd be like mid-20s, they're looking like 40, overweight, balding, doing all the overtime they can. I'm like, I do not want to be that guy. And, so I left, I went to Greece to do a season there when I was about 20. And it was the same thing, it was just meant to be like this one-off summer season with my best friend at the time, like just having fun, working bars, girls, alcohol, that whole thing. And then when we got back, he was able to just kind of go back to work. It was like, oh, that was nice. Now let's get on with reality. But for me, I was like, I don't want that part to end. Like that was the bit that I loved. This bit sucks, like coming back to the UK. So for me, it was the same. I was like, I can't come back to this. And for me, that was like the start of it, where it just kind of carried on from there and then never really ended, and here we are, 20 odd years later. But so anyway, coming back to you, how much of a plan did you have? I know you said that you just decided to go for it and see what happens. But not everybody can do that, right? So for most people, and I'm conscious when I'm talking to you and asking you these questions, I'm trying to kind of lay out a bit of a blueprint for other people that are listening about how you did it and how they could maybe do the same. So what would you say to people that are like, yeah, Christina, like, sounds great. I want to do it. I've got my little nest egg, my little cushion in the bank, but how am I going to make a living? How am I going to support myself? That's the bit that scares most people. So rewinding back to how you was thinking and seeing things then. I know now obviously you're set up and you're comfortable and you found your way, but what would you say to people now in hindsight to that question?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people get stuck on the fact that when they like try and make money online, they're trying to think of a forever business or a forever job. And it doesn't have to be that way. When I first started, I was like, I just need to make money online. From there, I'll start to figure it out. So I started in virtual assistants, and there's so much free information online. It's insane. If you look on YouTube, you can spend hours and hours learning so many skills, so much stuff online. And so I watched YouTube videos. I also took a course back, it was like 5 years ago now, on just online marketing skills. And so when I was traveling and I realized I really wanted to make this life sustainable, I was like, okay, how can I do this? And I was like, I want to make money online. I know a lot of people were doing virtual assistants. It's kind of becoming a big thing at that time. And I was like, all right, I think I could do it. Like, I know I'm a hard worker. Like, I've gotten to where I am now. I know I could do it if I just put my mind to it. So I took the course. I was watching lots of YouTube videos and I started to kind of perfect the skills. And my first client actually came from a family friend who knew that I had left and was asking how things were going. And I was like, oh, they're going good. I'm actually starting this business because I really want to keep doing this. And they're like, oh, actually, I know someone who might need something like that. They connected me to the first person. And my second client was off of Upwork. So I was kind of just creating all these mock samples of things that I could do for people and then just sharing them and talking to people that I knew about what I was doing, putting it on Upwork to find some clients and some work. But the big thing that I always stick to with people is like, it doesn't have to be forever. I pivoted a bunch of times from that moment to find what I like to do most. And if I never started that first thing in virtual assistants, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am now. And I'm not necessarily saying that it has to be like everything short term, but you don't need to think of it like we do when we're younger, being like, I'm going into career and my career is 25 years. So what can I be doing now that I can see myself doing in 5 or 10 years? Like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing 5 and 10 years from right in a second. Like, it might change a lot. The internet and the world of online jobs is changing loads. So you never know what could happen. For me, it's like, I'm planning for the next couple of years, even now what I'm doing, but I'm always open to learning new skills and pivoting because I think that's how you can grow the best as an online entrepreneur. So for me, in the beginning, it was like, what could I do that I know people are making money online that I think I would enjoy doing? And let's start there, start making money. And then over time, and at the time when I started, I was like, I think I'm going to like this. And I did like it for a bit. And then I started to find a niche within that. And then I pivoted from there to podcast stuff. And that's what I've been doing for the past couple of years. And then I started content creation, and that's taken a whole other spin on my like business and career and everything. So it's like, it doesn't have to always be for the longevity. You can just start something. And most entrepreneurs and successful people have started somewhere completely different and end up somewhere else, or they have loads of different businesses running. So I think that that mindset of like, what can it be for the next 5 or 10 years makes people stop starting because they're trying to think too deep into it when really they just need to like start taking action, even when they're not ready.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the way that the world's changed since COVID is insane, right?
Yeah.
The ability and the desires really for so many people to travel, to have more freedom, and to unlock this opportunity of making money online now. And I'd really like to talk about that and some of the different opportunities that are out there, because I almost think it's now kind of done like this weird 180 where now there's so much opportunity that it's like, shit, like, where do I even begin? And I'm kind of in that space as well, like trying to find my way, trying to build like this, this online kind of lifestyle, and looking at different things and like, which way should I go? What should I focus on? What do you think about that? Because there's so many different ways, and we hear about, oh, you can make money through social media, but is that really a thing unless you're like massive and like super famous? Or, do I do drop shipping? Do I do Amazon FBA? Do I start selling courses? There's so much stuff that it's almost like overwhelming. And I actually truly believe that you can, if you've got the right knowledge, and yes, there's going to be a big learning curve to it, but I've said it before on the podcast that whatever you do, whatever you're passionate about, everybody's got knowledge about something.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I used an example on another podcast about, if you know how to fix lawnmowers, I don't know why that came to mind, but if you know how to fix lawnmowers, and you can package that up into a course and you can market it correctly and the price point is correct, and the paid ads are hitting the right demographic of audience, there will be enough people out there to buy that course about repairing lawnmowers to basically give you an income to build a kind of nomad passive lifestyle if you want that. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that the world has changed a lot. When I kind of first started, it was like right before COVID had happened. And so things weren't necessarily where they are now, where a lot of people work online. TikTok is what it is, where you see constantly people having these online lifestyles and having these dream lives and stuff. But I think one of the big things is like, what would you actually enjoy doing? So you can start somewhere. And like I said, it doesn't have to be your longevity of 5, 10 years plan, but you have to like what you're going to do. Because if you, for the lawnmower example, you like doing lawnmowers, but you hate building an online course and you hate selling on social media, you're never going to be successful. And you don't necessarily need to be obsessed and in love with it, but you need to enjoy a bit whatever you're doing. Otherwise, you're just going to go back to square one where you're in a job that you don't like and you feel like you're searching for the next thing. So it's like, sometimes I would tell people, try a few different things. It doesn't have to be that you're trying loads of different businesses, but maybe try like working on like if you like podcasts, maybe go and see what it takes to become a podcast manager. There's so many people online who are doing the things that you think you want to do. Look at their daily life. Like, what are they doing in their daily life? What does their day-to-day look like? What are the skills involved? And then see if it's something you could be interested in. Because if you hate it, but you're doing it because other people are making money, you might end up just not even being successful because you're holding yourself back because you don't actually like it. So it's like trying to find that balance of what do you think you'd actually be interested in? Like when I first started in virtual assistants, I was really interested in marketing and I really wanted to get into social media marketing because I thought it was super cool. And so that's kind of where that interest led me to in the beginning. And as I was doing it, I was like, okay, I'm enjoying this. I'm not loving it. Like, what are other things that I could do in this space that I might like more? And that's like where I pivoted. But I think starting on the basis of actually intrigued and wanting to learn about that and wanting to do it is super important, because you could build this beautiful course, but if you don't want to sell to people on social media, you don't want to promote it, and you're not in that realm of things, then it's going to fall flat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, people also need to understand that, so many people say, I don't know, like, I don't know anything that would be of interest to people if I'm looking at selling courses or looking to sell my knowledge. And I'm like, you do, like, whether you know it or not, you have knowledge, you've done things that are going to be inspiring to other people. You just need to find a way of being able to monetize that knowledge. If you've done a job ever, if you've been anywhere, if you've done anything, you've got something in your head, in your brain, that is of interest to a demographic of audience out there somewhere. You just need to find a way of getting out your head and monetize it in some way.
100%.
What people need to realize with what we're talking about here is there's traveling and then there's living a nomadic lifestyle. And they're two very different things, because something that I struggle a little bit with being here in Mallorca is I want to be outside all the time. I want to be out. I want to be cycling in the mountains all the time. I want to be in the sun. I want to be out in nature. And I'm aware of that. And maybe that's something I need to lean more into, because I find that all of my time inside, I don't love. So I'm like, okay, maybe that means something. Maybe I need to look at that in a deeper way. But if you want to live a nomadic lifestyle and you need to generate an income, then you do need to put in the work in order to make something work. You need to learn something. You need to be consistent with something. It's a job, right? Traveling is where you just say what you said earlier. I'm going to take 6 months off, going to take a year off, going to go see the world, blow a load of money, then I'm going to go home. That's not what we're talking about. So how much time do you find, compared to obviously your previous day job where it was like, the solid 40, 50 hours a week, 1-2 weeks of holiday? Obviously we're not talking about that, but how much time are you putting into, your day job now?
So it's quite funny because I feel like I work more days now than I did before I had my day job, because technically, like, when you're self-employed, there is no day off. Like on the weekends, I could still be doing things. And so what I started to do, because at one point I found myself working so much and I was like, what am I doing? I'm working so much and I'm not being able to enjoy like where I'm living as much, because before I moved to Barcelona, we spent a year just going to different places every 4 to 6 weeks. And that was amazing. It was definitely tiring because it's hard to balance work and seeing somewhere. And I think slow travel is super important if you're working, so you don't have that pull of being like, I'm not doing enough while I'm here, but I also need to work, because you don't want to kind of sacrifice either. So I think slow travel is really important. But what I start to do now is like, I probably do a bit of work 7 days a week, but I'm not working a full 8-hour day, 7 days a week. There might be some days where I have loads of client work and I'm doing a lot of stuff, and I might pack it in to where I'm doing like 5 hours that day. And then I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go try a new rooftop bar in Barcelona with a friend. And maybe Tuesday I'll take off and I'll go and do a day trip somewhere. Or maybe I'll just take the afternoon and go explore on Barcelona or do things I want to do. Or maybe I'm meeting up with a coffee or trying a new restaurant I want for lunch with a friend. And so I give myself more flexibility in my days to do the things I want. But I'm in a phase right now where I'm trying to really build and grow my business a lot. So I'm definitely working probably more than I have previously. But I just try and give myself a little bit of a balance to enjoy events, do things during the week, make sure I'm still keeping myself happy and enjoying where I'm living, right? Living in Barcelona was the first time in 3.5 years that I've been in a place fully. I've always kind of been very, very nomadic. And so here's more of a home base. And I do travel from here and go to different places in Europe and stuff. But I try and just not have too rigid of a work week. My work weeks look different every single week based on my work and based on where I am or what I want to do. But I think it's so important to make sure that you're giving yourself the flexibility to schedule in things that are fun, regardless of work, because reality is when you work for yourself, you don't necessarily need to be doing 8-hour days. Like 8-hour days, 5 days a week isn't really necessary to still build a profitable business and still do well. So it's like finding that time where maybe it's like in the middle of the afternoon, take a 2-hour break and you go do something fun. Maybe the evening, yourself an early day off, and the afternoon you go do something, or you take a weekend off and then kind of work around, like shift around your work. But I think it's important to make sure you're making yourself happy work-wise and exploring or traveling or whatever, but balancing the two. Because for me, like I said, no work week looks exactly the same.
Yeah. And I think that's important, because wherever you go in the world, let's say that, you move to the most idyllic dream destination in the world, you went to live in, I don't know, the Maldives. If you move to the Maldives, it's not really my idea of a dream destination, a bit boring, but for a lot of people it is. If you went to live in the Maldives and you just, rented an apartment and sat there and just crunched out 40 hours a week of work, probably pretty quickly it would just become another place that you're living in and just working. So I think it's important to say, okay, if you're going to go down this road, you need to keep it exciting, different, fresh. You need to be moving, not letting things get too stale, which I think is easy to do. So you said that you're kind of using Barcelona as a base, and then you're going to different places in Europe around that. How does that look? What's the kind of, is there like a schedule to that? Is it like, 1 week a month I'll take off, or is it just kind of, when you feel like you need a change?
Kind of when I feel like I need a change. I feel like the past year, it was kind of based around certain seasons and things that I wanted to see or do in Europe. This year, I want to do a trip a month. That's my plan for this year for 2025, to do a trip a month. It might be a long weekend trip. It might be a week somewhere. But even outside of Europe, there's just too many places that I want to go and see. And I think the most amazing part of working for yourself and working online is having the flexibility to arrange your schedule as you see fit. And there are sometimes I have client meetings where I have to take them, and I have to take them on certain days, and that's totally fine. Like I said, you just build them into your schedule the way you kind of need to. I make sure whenever I'm traveling, I'm staying at somewhere that has really good Wi-Fi, or that I can go to a cafe and work somewhere. So I look for those things. That's important for me, just to make sure I'm getting the work I need done. But if you're a really big traveler and you want to live this life, if you move to one place, it's amazing getting to really incorporate yourself in a city. But I think it's important to still go and explore more, because otherwise you'll kind of always have that nagging sense of like, what am I doing? And I love Barcelona to pieces. Like I love the city so much, but it doesn't give me everything I need. And that's what I get when I get to travel.
Do you ever get lonely, moving around different social groups and relationships changing? And do you ever feel that?
Yeah, I definitely think I felt it a lot in the beginning phases. I met my boyfriend when we were traveling. So then we ended up obviously dating. We live in Barcelona together now. So I definitely have that relationship, which is really nice for the past couple of years. But I think friend wise, it can feel quite lonely sometimes, because even in Barcelona, it's a super transient city. And so I've had friends come and go and leave, and I'm making new friends all the time. And sometimes it's like exhausting, to be honest. And even when you're more nomadic and you're spending maybe a month somewhere and then you're moving to the next place, by the time you build those friendships in that month sense, you're already saying goodbye and leaving. So I do think that's one thing about like the digital nomad lifestyle, is that loneliness is absolutely a factor. I think I've learned to combat it a bit by also having really good relationships with people online on social media, people who are living the similar lifestyle to me, Some of them I've never even met before, but like we chat about all of those things because I think it's really important to talk to people who relate to you. Because in the beginning, when I first moved abroad and I had first like moved to Bali and stuff, and I was there for a little over a year. And in the beginning of being there, I would text my friends and being like, oh, like I wish I had more like really close friends, or I wish I had this or that. And they were like, you live in paradise. Like, what are you complaining about? And the reality is they can't understand what I'm going through. So it's important to kind of talk to people who get what you're going through and also understand that you need to put yourself out there more. You're going to have to go to networking events. You're going to have to maybe download Bumble BFF and go for a coffee with somebody, or you're going to have to jump in a Facebook group and see what events you can go to. And like, it's not always, I get nervous going to an event by myself, like I still do. But the only way to meet people and to build those connections community is to put yourself out there and kind of go and make the effort to build those friendships.
Yeah. And I find, at least for myself, I would really struggle to build those those networking groups or those friend circles if it wasn't for like doing lots of activities. So for me, my way into that was doing lots of hiking and cycling and, outdoor stuff. And, not only are you're forced to meet people because they're group activities, but you're also going to end up meeting people and hanging out with people that like to do the same things as you, which is super important. So for me, I don't go out much to bars and stuff. I prefer to go to bed early, get up early and do stuff in the day. So for me, going and meeting people in bars or like big drinking events, for me, it's not really of interest because that's not the kind of group that I want to be a part of. So that's definitely something to think about. But when it comes to relationships, and I'm talking about partners, how do you see that going? Now, obviously, you're in a relationship. What happens when you've had enough of Barcelona and you want to move to Singapore? How does that look?
Yeah. So I think I was very intentional when I did get into my relationship with the fact that I never want to be, not never, I can't say never, but I don't have the plan in the foreseeable future of really being settled in one place and this being our permanent home. And so when I was dating and I would meet people, and when I was like living in Bali, it's where we met. One of my big things was like, this is the lifestyle that I want to live. I want to spend a couple years in Barcelona. We're not going to be here forever. I know that for a fact. I know we'll move somewhere else, but I wanted someone who also had the ability to do so and the desire to do so. And I think that's so, so, so important because otherwise you end up in a relationship and you might meet someone abroad who wants to do it for a year. And that's great. But if they want to go back home afterwards and they want to live that settled lifestyle and you have this dream and desire to do something completely different, eventually the relationship's going to break down, or you're going to resent the person because time has passed and you wish you would have continued living your dream life, but you ended up doing this for your relationship. And I don't think if that part of you is so important to you, I don't think you should give it up. So for me, I was super intentional, and my boyfriend and I are both exactly the same, to where we want to live abroad. We want to kind of eventually have bases to where we can spend a couple months here and a couple months there and have that lifestyle together. But I don't think if I didn't preface that in the beginning and we didn't have those conversations from the start, that it could have went a different way. Because I have dated people in the past where they're like, living abroad for a year is great. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work because this isn't a year thing for me. This is my lifestyle. This is my goals, my dreams. And so I think it's really, really important to make sure you're having those conversations, to make sure you share similar goals. And of course, there might be some compromises on some things. But like for me, I still do solo travel. I went this summer and I did 2.5 weeks solo in Europe. My boyfriend's like, have a really good time. And we have that understanding of what each other wants to do and the goals. And if we can't do it together for whatever reason, we're okay with the other person going alone and doing that. But I think it's important to make sure that you are looking for those things and having those conversations so you don't end up in a relationship where you're like, damn, it's been 3 years and I'm back at home now and I'm miserable and I wish I would have just stuck to what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's so important to be clear. And life can be like just what you just said about, I'm going to heading off for a few weeks to travel. Hey, have fun, keep in touch. It's so nice and refreshing to hear that. And it just shows how damn simple life can be, if you're with the right partner. I know that, me, like most, wasted so many years collectively in bad relationships that aren't in a line at all with what I want to do, where I want to go. And inevitably you end up making sacrifices, for that person. And, outside it's all smiles and inside you're like, shit, like I'm going down the completely wrong road here, whether that's geographically or, having a family, which was my most recent experience. We weren't in a good place. She wanted a family. I didn't. What are you going to do? So that's 3 years plus, kind of down the toilet. So where are you on that? If you don't mind touching on the whole family thing, the typical script, go to school, get a job, mortgage, babies, never part of your story by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it really wasn't. So I'm 31 years old. I am the only one of my friends who is not pregnant, married, or with children back at home. So I definitely live a different lifestyle. But when I was in my early to mid 20s, I would always say, I'm not getting married. I'm not having kids. I didn't want it. I wanted the life of like living abroad and I wanted to travel. And that was my main priority. Now that's changed a bit now since I've met my partner and I met someone who wants to live a similar life to me. So for me, kids at the earliest would probably be like 35 because there's still so much I want to do in my life and still travels I want to do, business stuff I want to accomplish. And I want to, if I decide to bring a child into the world, I want it to be when I'm ready and I'm not giving up too much of my dreams, because the reality is things do get harder once you have kids. It's not impossible. It's not impossible to still travel and live abroad, but it's definitely adding another layer on top of it. So for me, that dream of like being a mother and being a wife and all of that was never at the forefront. I was never a little girl to like dream about her wedding one day. It just wasn't me. I've always been hyper independent and I've always felt like I didn't need anybody, which obviously I'm sure to a fault is not a good thing. But at the same time, it's led me to where I am. And I think that independence and the drive to live this different lifestyle put a lot of that in the back burner in my mind. But I think it also made it really nice to where when I met somebody and I was like, oh, I actually could see that. It's the fact that that's an added addition and a bonus to my life that I get to experience years down the line. And we're both in the similar timeline with that stuff, but we still get to kind of build our dreams. But I can't compare to somebody who's always had that dream of having a family or being married or, having the dream wedding or married by a certain age. I was never that way. I was always kind of like, I want to travel the world. I want to be a badass. I want to do the things I want to do. And that was always my main priority. So I think in a few years that might change a little bit, but at the same time, we've had conversations. My boyfriend's job requires him to travel loads. My job requires me to travel. Whenever we had a child, it would come with us wherever we're going. It's not going to stop us from traveling. It's not going to stop us from doing what we're doing. It will just be a new added part of our lifestyle. So I think that the fact that we both agree on that was super important. But yeah, I was definitely never the girl who like dreamed of her wedding since she was a little girl.
Yeah. Same for me. And I'm, again, not entirely sure why that is, where it comes from. But for me, I was just like, yeah, it's almost like there's not enough time in life to do it all. For me, I just always felt that way. Yes, there are some people that, when they leave school, they're like, I know that I want to be a vet, for example, and they're super focused. And by the time they're in their mid 20s, they've got it all sussed out, the perfect career in the house. And it's like, okay, let's have a family. And, finances aren't an issue and all the rest of it. But still, then it comes back to the grass is always greener. You always want what you don't have. And, whatever those people, and I've met people, from working on yachts for 10 years, super yachts, I've worked with billionaires, for, a big chunk of my life, more money, done more shit, built more businesses, own more crap than you can possibly imagine. And still I'm there with, just kind of doing my thing. And they're like, man, if I could go back in time, I'd do exactly what you're doing, so it doesn't matter what you have. You always want the other thing, which is really, really interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the actual tangible steps of how you're able to do what you're doing when it comes to the visas, because obviously you're American, you're living in Europe. Again, people might be listening thinking, well, shit, this sounds amazing. But, my majority of my audience are in the UK post Brexit. us going anywhere, pretty much for more than 3 months at a time is an absolute fucking nightmare, thanks to Brexit. So how did you do it? Was it complicated? Can anyone do it? What do you need?
Yeah. So obviously when you're nomadic, it doesn't really matter for the most part. Most places you can travel without be visa free and stuff. But being US, now you guys get to experience what's like being American in Europe. You get that 90-day rule. My boyfriend's also from the UK, so we're both on the similar spectrum on that. But Spain has a digital nomad visa. So if you're American and you work for yourself or you're a 1099, a freelancer, you can apply for the visa. If you're British, same. If you're self-employed, or even if you're employed and only UK, sadly not the US, you can come over here with your remote work job and live in Spain. So the process is not something you could do on your own. I would never suggest it. Spanish bureaucracy is probably one of the biggest nightmares I've ever experienced. It makes no sense. And it's quite difficult. So it's important to make sure you're working with established people here who can help you get it. And I would say it's worth it. We get 3 years in the visa. We can then renew it for another 2 after that if you want to. And then if you abide by their permanent residency rules during the 5 years you have the digital nomad visa, you can apply for permanent residency after that. So there is definitely a path for people who want to be a permanent resident. I won't ever be able to get that because it requires you to be you can't go out of Spain for more than 2 months a year in the 5 years. And that's definitely not within reason for my lifestyle. So I won't be going after that track. Plus, I don't think that being in one place for 5 years would be satisfying for me. I think a couple of years in Barcelona is perfect. And then maybe go somewhere else or split our time somewhere else as well. But the visa options are getting better. There's loads of European countries that now have digital nomad visas. There's also, if you don't work online, there's like investment visas for people who have passive income or can prove they have enough savings to move to these countries. You can do that as well. So I think there's definitely loads of ways to move abroad if you're looking to do it. It's just a matter of kind of having a really good deep dive into what is possible. There's a platform called Wandra. It's like WANDRA. And you can actually put in your citizenship and where you want to go. And they'll tell you all the requirements. So like that's another great place to look. But it's a lot of paperwork. It's a bit of hassle, especially when you become a tax resident. I'm a tax resident of Spain. So that was a whole other layer. But it is possible if you want to do it.
Yeah, and I can concur. It is a bureaucratic nightmare, but if it's something that you're really passionate about, and you just need to push through. And like you said, there are oodles of companies, and you just work with a company. They'll tell you what you need. For me, the biggest problem was not what the Spanish government wanted from me. It was being able to actually gather that documentation from the UK, like HMRC, and all of that kind of stuff was an absolute frigging nightmare. And I came close to giving up a couple of times, where they'd like lose documents, or you won't be able to contact anyone because you can't call or speak to anyone. It's like a circus. And you think, how it's no wonder that oh God, don't get me started. We're going to rant about the UK, but yeah, it's a mess, but you just got to keep pushing forward. So what's the other like hotspots on your list of where you could potentially see yourself putting down some roots for, again, maybe another couple of years? Are you like Costa Rica or Australia or?
I would love to go to Australia. I think for me, it's a bit too far for my family. I'm super close to my family, and I lived in Asia for 2.5 years. So I think like now being in Europe is like my happy middle ground. It's so difficult because I have this conversation with my friends all the time and with my partner. And it's like, I don't actually know where I want to go next. But I also think that maybe I'm also not looking to go somewhere and like be in one spot again. I think Barcelona is incredible, and I think we'll be here for at least another year. But I also kind of am more excited of the thought of having bases, like maybe spending 4 months here, 4 months here, or 6 months here and here, and kind of splitting time. I would love to have an ability to have 6 months in Europe and like do a lot of Europe stuff, and then maybe 6 months spend down in South America, Central America, and have a base where I can kind of explore different areas in that time period. So because I was nomadic for so long, and then I went to living in Barcelona, I think I'm like at the point where I'm like, okay, what's the happy medium? Like, how can we have a place? Like, I love having my own apartment. That's something I really missed about being nomadic, was having my life fit into 2 bags. That was, as a girl, very difficult. Obviously, you learn to live on minimal stuff, but sometimes you're like, oh, if I buy anything new, I have to get rid of some stuff. And I wish I just had like a place with all of my things, because outside of my 2 suitcases that I had some boxes in storage in my parents' basement, and that was pretty much my life. And so now having a place that, like, I have a closet and I have a place I could store, and we could, lock up stuff in our rooms if we wanted to travel and whatever we need to do, Barcelona apartment. So I think having bases is like my next goal and step. That way I could still travel from different areas of the world, but still have some sort of familiarity with where we are.
It's definitely a sacrifice that you have to make peace with, not really owning anything. Like, I've got this beautiful new apartment here in Mallorca, and my dad and his wife came over for a holiday recently, and they walked in and they was like, it looks like nobody lives here. I'm like, I don't really have much stuff. I've got my
Yeah.
bike and, TV and, kettle and toaster, and that's really all you need. Like, I don't need, most people just accumulate so much shit, and then they put it in cupboards and then they never see it for years. And it's only when they come to move, they're like, oh, I forgot I had this, so you don't need all that stuff.
No, you definitely don't. And I also think, like, I'm not sure if it's the same in the UK, but in the US, like, over consumerism is a real thing. Whenever I'm even back, I'm like, ooh, I need that on Amazon. Ooh, I need this. And this video is showing me there's some deal here. And there's always a sale here and here. And I'll go home and be like, I need all these things. And then when I'm in Spain, I'm like, I don't need any of that stuff. Like, but when I'm home, I feel it. Like, I feel like I need all these things and I need all these items in my life. The reality is you really don't.
Yeah, it's so true. You get sucked into it, living that life. But so tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now, where you've kind of settled in and found this groove that's able to generate enough money to sustain this lifestyle.
Yeah, so it's a combination. My main source of income is my podcast management business. So I have clients mainly in the US who have different podcasts that I help to do all of the pre to post production tasks for them. And then I help market the podcast for them. So that is the main stream of income that I have. And then I also do social media. So I do collaborations with brands to sell different products online, like moving to Barcelona guides and different ways for people to be able to live this lifestyle. So I would say it's a combination of the two. It took me a while to get to a point where I was quite comfortable. And I think that that's kind of another aspect of my initial journey, was moving to Asia helped me lower my cost of living while I built a business that was able to make me more money. So I could move back to Europe, or places where it costs obviously a bit more than it did in Bali or Thailand. And so that kind of helped in the beginning, was keep my costs low while I was building it and not making loads of money. And then being able to have enough income to move here was really nice. And being around entrepreneurs and being back in a city, I think gave me a lot more push as well. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And I really enjoy building those businesses and doing more content creation stuff and having YouTube channel. And there's so many facets I want to go with it, which I'm really excited about. But that's kind of the main source of income now.
So how long did it take you to learn that kind of stuff? Because you didn't have anything to do with podcasting, at least I don't think you did, when you first left. So was that something that you just studied and self-taught, or?
Yeah, so mostly self-taught. When I lived in Bali, I started my own podcast because I always had my dream of having my own podcast. And we launched it. It did well the first season, but I had some people around me who were kind of in that podcast space who were able to kind of give me some tips and tricks and stuff. And then I spent so many hours on YouTube and blogs and everything, reading and consuming whatever information I could to learn how to launch the podcast and how to grow it. And then obviously a lot of it was trial and error in terms of learning the growth stuff. But while I was doing it and I could understand the mechanisms behind it and see the strategy and kind of how to build it to make it grow, I was like, I definitely think I could do this for other people, because there's loads of people who want to have their own podcast, whether it's businesses, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, whatever, and they don't have the ability or the time, because it is a lot of time on the back end of actually publishing and promoting and doing a podcast. And so I was like, I think I can do this for other people. And so I started kind of promoting that and then got a few clients and then got referrals and it kind of started building from there. And then on the content creation side, I think everyone starts from somewhere and it's just a matter of like starting to make videos, starting to post stuff, engaging with people, building a community around you, people who also want to see your content, finding out what drives people, what people want to see, what makes people follow you, and a lot of trial and error as well. I think there's a lot of growth in starting your own business that needs to happen. There's a lot of things I still learn to this day about social media or YouTube or even new growth strategies for podcasts and stuff. But it's not always you take a course for a month and you know everything and it's all going to work out. I think a lot of the times you learn your initial skills and then you just start building on them more and more as time goes on, just like you would in a normal career. When you have your first job, you really don't know what the heck you're doing. Someone kind of trains you, you learn, and as you're doing, you learn more and more. And as you're doing, your skills get better and better. And I think the exact same thing when it comes to starting your own business.
I will admit, I struggle when it comes to the social media, at least growing the Instagram channel. Facebook's not too bad, but Instagram for me is really, really hard to grow. And I think it's because, my channel is predominantly about the podcast. So it's podcast clips. And it's all really professionally done, looks amazing, but it's just really hard to grow in that space. And it kind of frustrates me daily that highly professional and highly polished content, but it's getting a fraction of views compared to someone that's, doing some dumb shit, and they get 1 million views. I'm like, fuck, it's so annoying.
Yeah. It's definitely tough, I would say, social media. It's finding where your audience really lives, like what platforms are they really on and where they want to listen, and can you double down on the amount of content that you're putting out on those platforms for those people, and kind of just A/B testing to figure out where you get the most engagement, where you're getting the most follows from. And I will say, I always tell my clients with podcasting, it's a long form game. Like it's long term. There's not going to be many podcasts unless you already have a big platform where you start posting stuff and it just blows up. I think it takes a lot of time and you're kind of feeding the algorithm machine over time. YouTube's obviously probably one of the hardest ones to crack, but once you can crack it, it's a machine that will work for you very well. So it's just a matter of like time, effort, and lots of testing.
So are you doing all of your own editing across all the channels?
So yeah, I do a lot of my own editing, but then I am going to start outsourcing that in the coming new year because I don't have the capacity at the moment to continue with the amount of content I want to start building out as well.
Yeah, especially when you're putting it out. So are you doing different stuff for your YouTube compared to what you're putting on Instagram, for example?
Yeah. So Instagram's much more short form. You only get people's attention for a little bit of time. And YouTube, you're getting a full 15-minute either vlog of what life is like in Barcelona, or I'm going into in depth in topics about living abroad or what I do for online work or the realities of making friends abroad and things like that, to where you can actually have those longer conversations and not have to snip it all into such a short window.
And obviously people's biggest challenge with social media, for anybody thinking, yeah, I'll move somewhere and just start a social media channel. It's content, isn't it? Like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Is there enough stuff going on in my life? And I've had this conversation multiple times with the agency where I'm like, I want to start putting out different stuff. The podcast clips just isn't doing it. And they're like, oh, just lean more into your lifestyle, tell everybody what you're doing in Mallorca, that's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I know it sounds that way, but in reality, my life here, even though I'm in Mallorca, pretty much, I get up, I work from home, and then I cycle and I, go out for dinner. I'm like, I don't know how I can consistently generate content out of that. There's not enough cool shit going on in my life.
There's so much general content that you could do. I think one of the biggest things that people do is overthink it. They're like, I don't have a really exciting life. And I do it all the time because I have a routine here in Barcelona. Like my average day to day isn't super exciting, but I've even caught myself like watching other people. I'm like, ooh, what are they doing for their day today? Or what's their life look like in New York? And they're not doing anything crazy. They're just sharing their day. So maybe it's sharing the cycle ride in Mallorca and what it's like to cycle around, or maybe a new restaurant you go to, or what you're doing working and then going for lunch and it's just a day in the life. And I think a lot of the times people just like watching people. That's what I've realized the most thing. People just like watching people. Some of the big Instagram, TikTokers, YouTubers, if you look at the stuff they're doing, it's all boring. Like it's all just normal day-to-day stuff. Obviously, unless you're like, I think travel content creators are completely different. And I think sometimes we compare ourselves to them because I'm like, I'm not going to Machu Picchu on a Tuesday and then going to some crazy Peruvian place on a Wednesday. That's not obviously my life. It's more of a settled, or not even say settled, but it's more of a normal kind of live abroad life. So I'm like, how can I just bring people into my world? And I also think that it inspires people. I've had people who message me and are like, I love just seeing your life in Barcelona and it all seems like really fun or nice, or I can see myself living there based on what you shared. I think those things are super helpful.
So the actual tangible steps, let's say I'm just going to be selfish and talk from home.
Yeah.
Whoever's listening, this is for me. But let's say that I want to start putting out videos about my life in Mallorca, right? And after this, I go down to Mercadona, right? And I'm going to go and do some shopping. Is it literally just like panning and just taking like short video clips? Or is it better to do like one continuous thing where you're talking over it and then edit it? Like, what's the actual best way to do it?
I think the best way to do it in the beginning is to try different styles. So different styles work for different people. You could do it where you're like talking to the camera while you're doing things in Mercadona. I would say panning a lot of times loses people's attention, but maybe it's a clip of like I don't know, some spices or something in the store and like your clip of you grabbing it, then clip of you like dropping it in the car, a clip of you going to get the meat or doing whatever, and clip of just different things. Some people just like to see what's a grocery store like in Spain. You know, like people are genuinely curious. And I think that's the part that we kind of overthink is it could just be, I have videos where I do like a day in the life and I'll go food shopping. And I'm like, I'm making my food shopping list. I'm in my kitchen and I film myself doing my food shopping list. I just film myself looking in my fridge and they're all short clips. Like each one's not going to be more than, I'll cut it down to maybe 0.6, 0.5 seconds, maybe even shorter if I'm trying to get things like through. Because the really long clips will lose people. And so just a bunch of little short clips and then a clip of me walking to the store, clip of the entrance to the store, clip of me getting the cart, you know what I mean? Clip of me grabbing a tomato, grabbing this. Maybe the bakery section at Lidl looks nice today. So I'll like do a short clip of like all the bakery stuff. And so it's just kind of doing that. And people are like, oh, what a nice day in Barcelona. And people like it. And I mean, not necessarily exciting, but it's something different than their norm. And I think that's what people are like, oh, that's cool. Because I even follow influencers who live in New York, for example, and they're like going to get coffee and they're just walking home and they're showing clips of New York City. I love New York City, so I just love watching it. It's not that they're doing anything crazy or exciting, but they're just taking me on their day in New York City. And it's like, you almost imagine what it'd be like to live there. And that's kind of the thought process, I think.
And then do you take them clips and edit it all within Instagram or do you use a different?
No. So I'll use either InShot or CapCut. They're just much easier to use. Instagram, I think they have a lot of work to do on their edits in the app and you can do way more and it's way easier to cut the clips and drag things around on either InShot or CapCut. CapCut is really good for doing your caption. So if you're doing a voiceover or if you're talking in the video, you can load it right into CapCut, hit auto-generate captions. It'll auto-generate them. You pick your font, your size, make it look cute, and then you just go through and listen, correct any words you need to. And so those two apps are the best.
And then you just upload it and away you go.
Yeah.
So is that like, are you doing that like once a day, 3 times a day, 5 times a day?
So in terms of videos, I do about 5 videos a week on Instagram. And then I'll do about 14 videos a week on TikTok. But TikTok's different because it doesn't have to be a whole vlog video. It could literally just be me talking about something about living abroad or something I experienced or maybe my favorite store in Barcelona. So those can be a bit easier to film. I think TikTok's a little like less polished than Instagram, but I would say if you can commit to 4 to 5 videos a week on Instagram, you could definitely see growth for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of work, isn't it? And you've got to be so consistent with it. It's like,
Yeah.
wow.
It's not it's not easy. And for example, like the past 6 weeks, I've been losing followers every day on Instagram. I gain followers, but I lose more than I gain. And I've talked to friends who are the content creators, and sometimes these things just happen. And it could be an algorithm thing. It could be, the time of the year, people are spending less time on it, whatever it might be. You need to kind of let go of the numbers. And I think that's one of the hardest part is for the first few weeks when it was happening, I was getting really, really upset, and I still get frustrated. Don't get me wrong, but I'm like, it's just a part of the game. Like, it's just something you need to go through. You need to keep pushing and not attach your worth as a creator to the numbers that you're seeing, because it could just take one video that goes viral, then make all your other videos start jumping up. And then all of a sudden you have this community who are all following you and all want to watch your videos. So it's like, don't ever give up, because it might just be one video away from it all going the way you want to.
Yeah. What I will say about that, I've had a few clips that have gone viral, like 1 million plus for whatever reason. And I've ended up getting a massive spike in followers, but they're not really people that are really tuned into our content. They just follow me off the back of one silly airport clip or whatever. So I guess it swings and roundabouts. But look, I see the time's flying by here. So as we get to the end here, Christina, just like where does this all go? Like, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Do you see this kind of, I don't know, ending at some point and you saying this is the place for me, and buying a place and, growing old in one spot?
Oh, I don't think so. I think the 5-year plan question is always the question I'm like, don't ask me. Because I think I have like a really big fear of being stuck somewhere. Yeah. So I don't think I'll ever be like in a very settled, we live in one place lifestyle. But my goal in the next 5 years would be have a home, probably back in the US, that I could go and stay at when I'm visiting my family and stuff. And then have a apartment or home that I own in Europe, and then kind of go back and forth between the two. Yeah. My boyfriend's in the music industry. So it's like, we will never have a normal lifestyle. That's just, we're not going to look that way. It's just not the way that our lives are kind of going. And I love that. I think it gives me excitement. And I'm like, ooh, I'll never really have that normal life. Obviously, when you have kids in play, things might change a little bit, but who knows? I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah, I have some probably deep-rooted fears in staying still, which are probably an issue, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, I'm sure if we all sat down with a therapist and they dug deep enough, they'd find some stuff. But makes us live this way. But it's all good. So lastly, do you have any kind of opportunities or offers or things that people can reach out and get involved with you through?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a bi-weekly Nomad newsletter that goes out. You can find that on my Instagram bio, and you can sign up for that. And I share remote jobs, tips for moving online, life in Barcelona, different resources and stuff. And then I will be having a moving to Barcelona guide that goes super in depth in terms of finding apartments, visas, co-working spaces, restaurants, like Wi-Fi, all these things that help you kind of settle in Barcelona. That'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. So definitely keep an eye out on that. But yeah, follow me on Instagram if you have any questions. It's Christina with 2 A's at the end, and then Davis. You can always send me a message. I love chatting with you guys, helping you. I know what it's like to want to make this move and be like, where do I even start? So I definitely get that. But yeah, that's how you guys can find me.
Cool. Yeah. And we'll get all of Christina's information and put that all in the show notes. So you can reach out to Christina and, pick her brains on leaving and moving to Barcelona or wherever you want to go. Sounds like she's got all the answers. So Christina, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's been really fascinating. I would have loved to have dug in a bit deeper into the social media side of things, just from a purely selfish point of view, but maybe I'll reach out to you on Instagram and pick your brains on that too. So thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time, and it's amazing what you're doing. Keep up the good work and keep inspiring others to live their best life. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course. I'm super happy to be here.
Thanks so much. And thanks for everybody listening and watching at home. Till next week, we'll see you then on another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. Till then, take care. See you then.